which makes it sorry, which makes it possible to do the glass containers rather than plastic. So that's super helpful. All right, so I'll get my containers set up. The first step is taking 10 milliliters of the sample water and putting it into a jar. So we have a nice little vacuum action pipette system here. And I take the used pipettes along with used containers and put them on a tray to put in the autoclave when we're all done. So this is the second one is for the McGower outfall. These are notoriously dirty sites, especially during tourist season. So that's just starting. And every year it seems like Cannon Beach says, oh, we fixed these sewers that were leaking. And they never seem to quite fix it, but hopefully they will this year. All right, so once we get 10 milliliters in our sample jars, we take distilled water and fill it up to the 100 milliliter mark. And then in the control, we just fill that straight up 100 milliliters of distilled water. And then for each of these containers, we put in some Interalert, which is the sort of food for the bacteria to chew on, if they do exist there. And then spin that around. Good, get that one. Let it start to absorb. Actually, I got a little bit more than 100 milliliters in my control sample, so I'm going to dump a little bit out because it just is straight distilled water. All right, there we go. And I want to label that as well. I didn't label this one like I did with the others. And one for the Gower outfall. When we do this with students, it's a pretty big effort to keep fingers out of the inside of the bottles. They seem to really want to put their fingers in on the lips of the jars, but we don't have too much trouble with that when we do it on our own. But I'm actually surprised. I've never had a control sample actually show any bacteria at all. So that's actually probably a pretty good reference that we're doing things in a way that is sterile. All right, so that one looks like, the Tolomon outfall looks like it's ready to put into this Quanta tray. So what we do is we just pop that open without, two hands at once, without touching the inside of it. Take the lid off, and without making too many bubbles, try to pour it down into the tray. And if you notice, it just hits the bottom out right here, but as soon as, I'm gonna move this a little bit. As soon as I take one of these and press it in, and then feed it through the sealer, pop out on that back side of it. The tray is all sealed up, and the sample is ready to go into the incubator once I put the time that we do it. And I put a little bit ahead of time. We're actually ahead of schedule, so I'll remember that when I take them out tomorrow. And continue with our other samples here as well, as long as they've dissolved. Well, that looks like the control has. So that one next.
And while Doug is finishing this part up, I forgot to tell the folks that are here tonight that we need volunteers to pick up samples and drop off at the high school. Ideally, how it's been working is the students, Doug's students, process the samples. But what we need is help with is picking up the samples at one of 7, I think, locations we have right now. And so if any of you want to help with that, definitely please be in contact with me.
A small refrigerator near the front desk of the school, so you can bring them in and just drop them off in the refrigerator and go. You don't have to spend much time trying to get that all done. You can just come in and drop them off. So it's a pretty easy process. All right.
While Doug's doing that last one, we had some excitement before the pandemic. Congresswoman Bonamici came to the old Seaside High School and visited with the students that normally process the samples, which was super exciting. They told her all about the Blue Water Task Force and did a demo similar to this and showed her how to read results. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was super fun. All right, so we'll put this last sample in the incubator, and then it's set at a temperature of 41 degrees Celsius, and these samples will stay there for 24 hours. Sort of to complete this process, what I did yesterday was pick up samples and then process them so that they're ready right now to show you the back end of what actually happens. And so if you want to come over here, Reba, what this is a UV light, and it shines down below. And when there's bacteria in the samples, they'll fluoresce in these trays. So you can see, this looks like it's fluorescing, but that actually is a clean sample. This is the Tolomon outfall reading. So it has some bacteria. I'll show you how we can evaluate exactly how much. And then this is a Gower Street outfall from yesterday. There were 19 of those large wells and 1 of the small wells, which,
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's not very good. So much for them working on the system and really making it a lot better this year. That's from yesterday, and it's probably only going to get worse when the tourist season really hits. So that is it. You want to show this tray? So what we do is we look, we find the number of large wells and we run down. So that was 19, and then 1 small well. So 24.6 on the most probable number table and then multiply that 10 by 10. So that is 246 for a reading. And Jesse and Bree, you can correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it 40 that's supposed to be sort of into the zone of not healthy, or is it 70 still?
Bree, are you there?
I can help you.
Okay.
So medium bacteria is technically 36 to 130. So anything over 130 colony forming units is high.
Okay, so 246 is what we got from stuff from yesterday. I'll do the sample again today, or process it, and I'll check tomorrow with the actual ones from today that we pulled. But definitely higher up than I had hoped for.
Yeah, that's pretty hot.
That's the lab. It's kind of nice. We're in the basement of Seaside High School, the new building. This is the chemistry lab. It's our chemistry preparation room. But I got them to let me have this table in the middle so that when I have my earth science class, I can have the whole class around the table and they can see how things work and do the process themselves. It used to be we kind of were shoved into a back corner and it was hard for much of the student population to get involved. But this time around, it seems like it's going to be much easier.
Thanks for filming, Ava.
You're welcome.
Great job. And thank you, Doug. Great job. I'm trying to put a link to our North Coast page where everyone can see the results, but I can't, I'm not able to, I'm waiting for oregon.surfrider.org. And I know that you were
Colleen got that up.
Colleen's got it.
Oh, awesome.
She got
awesome.
it in the chat. Yeah, thanks. She beat you to it. Our website's been a little clunky in Oregon right now, but the headquarters site is reliable. And yeah, you can get the results there. And thank you, Doug. That was awesome. Great demonstration. Doug mentioned dirty water at Gower Street and Tullavana. And I don't know if Michael covered this in his presentation or not, but I do know that DEQ, we had a discussion with them just last week, and they were going to be doing some additional monitoring in the Cannon Beach area, I think this summer during their season, to try and better understand potentially where some of those sources are coming from and help Cannon Beach with solutions. So it's an iterative, ongoing process to get to the bottom line of those bacteria contributions sometimes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Doug. Thank you, everybody. That was super awesome. And Colleen, if you want to share your screen and take it away, that would be great.
All righty. There we go. All right. Can everybody see this?
Yep. Great.
Looking good.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Colleen Henn. I actually help run the Blue Water Task Force program across the country. But today we're going to focus big picture on Surfrider's Clean Water Initiative. So the goal of the Clean Water Initiative is protect water quality in local waterways and reduce ocean pollution so it's safe to surf, swim, and play in the ocean. Clean water has been a central focus of Surfrider Foundation since its initiation over 30 years ago now. And I'm fortunate enough to get to work on the clean water team with headquarters. Unfortunately, there are a number of sources of beach and ocean pollution, which I'm actually going to focus on today. The number one source of beach closures and advisories in the United States is stormwater and urban runoff. Basically, anytime it rains, it picks up all the pollutants on the roads and brings them downstream into our rivers and eventually into our oceans. Pets and wildlife and agriculture can all cause localized issues, but what we're really going to focus on today is sewage. And it's something that we've really leaned into at Surfrider in the past year or so, because we realize there's a lot of education to be done about just how much sewage does end up in our coastal waterways. And it's not something that a lot of people like to think about, but it is an important truth that we need to talk about. So we created these infographics not too long ago to basically educate people about what happens underwater, what happens when you flush your toilet underground. A lot of times our wastewater systems are sort of out of sight, out of mind. And unfortunately, a lot of our systems have been neglected for a long, long, long time. So we have old infrastructure with increased development and rising sea levels. And this creates a perfect storm of water quality problems where sewer lines are breaking and it's causing sewage spills in our coastal water quality. So in our coastal water bodies. So Bree, if you don't mind putting the first link in the chat about sewer leaks, I'm gonna have Bree put this in the chat so you all can reference this. And this is something that we created for everybody to be able to share and use as an educational resource to sort of show what happens underground and sort of help our chapters start to talk about this. So even when you're sewered, things can go wrong. Tree roots can impact the sewer lines. Unfortunately, a lot of people flush things that shouldn't be flushed, including grease or any flushable wipes. And also stormwater can misconnect and cause overwhelming pressure to these sewage systems as well. So all of these things cumulatively impact our wastewater systems. And then I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody on this call, but I do believe there are some areas in Portland that still have combined sewer systems. So these systems capture stormwater and wastewater in the same pipes. And they're actually created, some communities started to put these in the ground in about 1850, and we stopped putting them in 1950. But from what I understand, there are some areas in Portland that are still serviced by these combined sewers. And basically what happens is, again, with overdevelopment and with overwhelmed systems, they're actually created to have these bypass systems where if there's too much sewage or too much stormwater in the pipes, they're on purpose supposed to leak into waterways. So these are combined sewage overflows, and unfortunately are just another way that sewage can end up in our coastal water bodies. We also created these infographics for septic systems and cesspools. So if that's something that your chapter is interested in kind of in diving into, we can share those resources as well. But we just want to start talking about these things because unfortunately sewage is in our waterways more than we would like to admit. And it's our job at Surfrider Foundation to educate people about that. And of course, this is a problem because pollution puts public health at risk at the beach. So over 20,000 beach closures and swim advisories are issued every year in the United States to protect against illness. And when you come in contact with sewage, you can get GI issues, eye, ear, sinus infections, skin rashes, and unfortunately, some worse and potentially very serious infections. And that's where Blue Water Task Force comes into play. So Blue Water Task Force is Surfrider's volunteer water quality monitoring program. So basically people like Doug across the country and Ava, thank you, Ava, run these programs to help protect public health of the beach. And Surfrider chapters really run these programs to help address and fill in the gaps of the agency-run beach monitoring programs. So in certain coastal areas, sampling's only done seasonally. I believe that's the case in Oregon. So maybe the Blue Water Task Force there can help fill in those gaps to sample year round. So that's the kind of thing that we do. And we also sample areas such as fresh water sources and creeks that aren't necessarily monitored by our agency programs. So we sample for Enterococcus. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, what exactly it was that Doug was doing in the lab, what we're looking for. It's called Enterococcus. It's a bacteria that lives inside of the gut, the GI tract of humans and other animals. It's a fecal indicator bacteria. And it's important to note that Enterococcus itself doesn't make you sick, but it's used as an indicator bacteria. So if there's Enterococcus in the water, there are other illness-causing pathogens that can make you sick. And then what we do is we compare our Blue Water Task Force results to water quality standards set by states to protect public health. Oops. Okay. These are all of our labs across the country. So we have COVID kind of changed everything, but beginning 2020, we had over 50 labs. I think about 41 of them have reopened since COVID. So that's really great. But you can see these are all of our lab locations across the country. And every year, this program continues to grow. And obviously 2020, we took a hit. But the interesting thing is that while we collected 25% fewer samples in 2020, we did collect samples at more locations. This goes to show that, you know, despite a lot of our chapters this year knew that since beach use increased a lot during COVID, we really needed to get back out there as soon as possible and create more water quality information for people because there were so many more people using the beach. And last year, more than ever, we knew we all needed access to information to be able to protect our health. So, and then this is a graph we like to show that basically shows the bacteria levels measured by the Blue Water Task Force in 2020. You can see that 21% of the samples across the country that were collected were high, 10% were medium, and 69% were low. This has been very stable since we started doing the Clean Water Report. And we like to mention that most of the 21% of samples that are high are pulled from those fresh water sources. So those are the creeks and discharge pipes, and basically areas like polluted water that comes not from the ocean, but that comes from inland that discharge onto our beaches. You can access all of our Blue Water Task Force information at that link below. I don't know if anybody wants to put that in the chat, that would be really helpful, but bwtf.surfrider.org. We just redid our website, so it's easier to find water quality information near you. And what we do with the Blue Water Task Force after we post our data is we are really trying to communicate our results. And the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Everyone at Surfrider knows that. The more we communicate our Blue Water Task Force results to community members, the more change we are going to see. So we're encouraging chapters to post their results on social media, create annual reports if they have the capacity to do so, and honestly just repeatedly educate the community via community meetings and be persistent to try to build awareness of the local water quality issues in your community. So I wanted to tell you all just a happy story of one of the stories that we featured in the Clean Water Report this year. The Blue Water Task Force program in Fort Lauderdale, it's technically Broward County chapter. It's run by Mike Scully, this man right here. And it was a really amazing story of just how one person can make a difference. So we've really been trying to highlight this. So Mike runs a Blue Water Task Force program actually out of his home. He was a retired dentist and was like, well, I know how to run an autoclave and I know how to add 100 milliliters to a bottle, so I can do this. So we got him trained up on our standard operating procedures and has a separate area in his home where he keeps an entire sterile water quality lab, which is really amazing. He was pulling a sample from 2 beaches once a month. But then Fort Lauderdale experienced the biggest sewage spill in the United States to date. More sewage was spilled then than oil spilled during the BP disaster. So crazy amount of sewage spilled. He explained it to me as mega yachts sitting in sludge. So he rallied a bunch of his paddleboarding and surfing friends to start collecting samples at 15 locations pretty much every day until the sewage spill cleared. And he was communicating regularly with the city of Fort Lauderdale saying, we need to do more testing here. Like they basically figured out where the sewage spill was coming from through their testing. And fast forward 6 months or so after continued communication with the city of Fort Lauderdale, the city actually invested a couple, I think it was like $15,000 in repeated testing in the area, in the intracoastal areas where Mike encouraged them to sample. So when the city goes to sample them, the city actually has to acknowledge if there is pollution there, and they're able to respond to sewage spills quicker. So water quality campaigns take a really long time to run, unfortunately, because like I said, a lot of our water infrastructure is out of sight, out of mind. But Just one person's dedication got the city of Fort Lauderdale to commit to 15 intracoastal sites that they are now monitoring on their own with their budget. It's an amazing, amazing win. And the chapter continues to be involved and try to help get the word out to try to help find solutions to any water quality problems that still exist. And I just wanted to plug our clean water report. We put a lot of time and effort into it. You'll see a couple other stories just like that I just told you. It's also just a good snapshot of our clean water content for 2020. And then of course we have our coastal blog at Surfrider. I don't know if anybody else is familiar with our blog, but it's basically where we do our continued storytelling. So if you're ever looking for happy tales of successes in water quality, this is a good place to go. All right, and I believe I was going to kick it over to Charlie to talk about one of your recent water quality wins.
Sure, I can talk. Everybody knows that Charlie can talk. I'll be brief and just say that, the water quality monitoring is, it really is one of the best programs that we have as a cornerstone for campaigns. And, beach cleanups do a similar thing to people. But when you engage yourself in water quality monitoring and you learn that there's a problem in your community and that you can be part of the solution, it's really, really empowering. And, my first on-ramp with Surfrider was starting a Blue Water Task Force program because I got sick from surfing in Newport. And that led, to a program that still exists today, and many inspired people over and over again. A public works department that's really changed their attitude about how they deal with sewage. We've addressed, I think, 17 cross connections. That's not something that you saw in the diagram or the photo, but believe it or not, even separate systems suffer from time to time. Contractors will hook a sewer line up to a storm drain line, which means instead of that sewer going to the wastewater treatment plant, it just goes straight to the ocean. And so we corrected about, I think, just short of 20 of those in Newport. There may be even more than that I don't have record of. And that was a pretty big win that came directly out of the program and volunteers. Another one on the North Coast that's been pretty cool was the replacement of the entire septic system and drain field at Short Sands. That was kind of a tenuous project, and that we had to take out a lot of trees to put in a drain field. And there was a lot of concern about what was being, taken out there as far as the landscape and the habitat, but there was also a lot of concern from chronic water quality. And so that was another great example where our Blue Water Task Force program had been monitoring there for some time and was able to partner with parks and source out some of these little areas. So it's a great cornerstone for people to get involved with solving solutions and actually like seeing a new septic system at your beloved Short Sand State Park, when hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people go and use those restrooms and flush those toilets right next to where you're surfing every day. It means something. And so I think it's a really cool program. I think it is the cornerstone for a lot of our campaigns. Monitoring has its limitations when it comes to bacteria. And, one of the reasons why we try and get people involved in Hook for a long time is that bacteria you need to see trends, and we need to look at other indicators. And we often involve ourselves in study plans that are far from just the one and done kind of monitoring once a week or once a month. But that's where it gets really fun, and that's where we can really kind of roll up our sleeves and solve problems and get creative. So those are just a couple of examples here in Oregon that we've done, but I can think of many other opportunities in front of us with this program, and a lot of work to do as well, because as we more and more people use the beach, more and more people use restrooms, and more and people develop the coast, the more problems we're going to have and the more challenges we're going to have with managing water quality.
Thank you so much, Charlie. And thank you, Colleen. That was awesome. Super great presentation. And just a reminder, if folks have questions, Bree put it in the chat. We'll definitely have some time for questions, but want to get to all our presenters. So Mike, if you're ready to share your screen, we would love to hear about the beach monitoring program.
Am I sharing my screen? I don't know which screen. I got 3 screens.
You are sharing, it looks like we're seeing the slide. Is there a full screen view?
Yeah,
Present?
okay, just a second. I think I have to stop sharing and then pick a different one. All right, share my screen.
The joys of technology.
How do you feel about that one?
Perfect.
Okay.
Great.
Well, thank you for having me. And the previous presentations were great. Doug's demonstration is exactly the same sort of stuff we do. And Colleen's explanation about fecal indicator bacteria and where it comes from and why it's important, that was a great lead in. So thank you. We've timed this thing perfectly. This is our 20th year, starting this week of the Oregon Beach Monitoring Program. And I'd like to point out that I'm reporting on work that other people have done, really. Thomas Lawson and Shane Bennett are kind of the core of this program as far as getting the work done. As you guys probably know firsthand, it takes a lot of work to consistently do a field monitoring program. And Thomas in particular has been the core of it for many, many years. And I see on the list of people that have dialed in, some of my colleagues, Aaron Borisenko's listening in there. He's the manager of the water quality monitoring section at DEQ Lab. Curtis Cood is manager at Oregon Health Authority. Contact Recreation Safety is an Oregon Health Authority rule under their jurisdiction. I also saw York Johnson. York is the DEQ North Coast Basin Coordinator. You're kind of in his jurisdiction there on the North Coast. And Shane Bennett is one of the field people that actually do the work. And where do I advance? No, that's not it. Right? Don't tell me.
It might be in the bottom left corner. If you hover,
Bottom left corner.
something come up.
What happens if I do? Where am I? I'm sorry.
No problem.
Zoom changes all of the controls just to make it confusing.
Yeah, they do.
If you click on the slide, does that advance it or bring up the controls? Or you can try your space bar.
You know, I did this before, didn't I? When we were.
Yep. Or the arrow keys also might work.
Yeah, it advances on my my thing. We tested this. We particularly tested this. So
Yeah, this is a classic Zoom move where the test works perfectly and the live event gets wonky.
What the heck? I am so mad at this thing.
You can try stop screen sharing and start again. It might be advancing on a different
Wait a minute, I got all my things here. I stop. And then I go to share screen again, you think?
Yeah.
I pick this one again. Okay, how am I looking?
Looking good.
Okay, so where is the
Still on the
control?
first slide though.
It's on what?
It's still on the first slide, but
Yeah, well,
Are you able to use your arrow keys?
they don't do anything. Spacebar to son of a gun.
When I clicked on my slides, they moved forward.
They move forward. Well, it moves forward on my little screen where I have it doesn't.
maybe try stopping screen share and share the full screen rather than just the slides. Like share, is there like a desktop option?
Yeah, I'm gonna share this one. I am so sorry.
No problem.
Are
We're doing good on time, so take your time.
we?
Yeah, we're doing all right.
So what does that look like?
That's good. Yeah.
Does it say big picture or what does it say?
We're on the big picture. So if you click,
Okay. There's the first screen.
yeah. So we can just probably stay in this. It's mostly full screen. It's not quite full screen, but it's
I have
close
no
enough.
idea why that it worked. We tested it. I can't believe
We did. No, you're doing great. It looks
Okay,
good.
sorry about that. So this is an outline of the presentation. I'll give you the big picture of what our data shows. An overview of the beach monitoring program. We've just completed or are completing a biennial beach selection process where we kind of look at our sites and reselect them, and a little bit about future investigations. So the big picture of Oregon beaches is, on the whole, they're pretty clean. We tend to focus on problem areas, which we should, but last year only 2.1% of our beach samples exceeded the criterion of 130 enterococcus per 100 mils. It's a little bit worse for water quality, freshwater samples. 25% last year did not meet the criteria. Overall, in the 19 years we've been collecting data, only 7.4 of the samples exceeded the criterion. We do have a few hotspots, and those are things we tend to focus on. The objective of the program is to protect public health at the beach through monitoring fecal bacteria contamination and issuing advisories. And as Colleen pointed out, that the fecal indicator bacteria themselves don't cause disease, but they're an indicator that disease-causing organisms could be present. The program has got 3 partners. There's the Environmental Protection Agency. They provide the funding. This year we received a grant for $221,000 that we split with Oregon Health Authority. They provide data management and oversight, and it's a national program. DEQ provides the grant administration. We do the monitoring and data analysis. We report the results to Oregon Health Authority usually twice a day. And we manage the data and store it in our online data repository. And Oregon Health Authority, this is really their program. Contact Recreation Safety is a OHA program. They issue the beach advisories. They post things on their webpage. There's signs at state parks, at the beach access points. Usually it's state park employees that flip these signs depending on the data. They also do stakeholder outreach and public contact. And as I mentioned, Curtis here, he's the person in charge of that. In Oregon, we have 362 miles of coastline, according to Wikipedia. 93 miles of that are rocky or inaccessible areas. They're not beaches. 45 miles are under federal ownership. We cannot monitor on federal property. The statute that set this up, legislation forbids that. So we have about 224 eligible beach miles. This is what the national program looks like. It's the ocean beaches, Gulf of Mexico, and the Great Lakes. The blue number is the number of Beach Act beaches that EPA has identified, and the red is how many beaches are monitored. And we monitored, last year we monitored 18 out of a total of 89 possible beaches. See, a lot of these states, California, a lot of these East Coast states do all their beaches, or pretty close to all their beaches. And that's because they supplement their budgets with money outside the grant that they receive. We are supported only by that grant. Earlier this year, there came out a report by the American Shore and Beach Preservation Association that looked at the 29 beach monitoring programs and evaluated them, rated them according to these metrics here. And Oregon really didn't do too well on their report card. We're as far as the density of sampling and the frequency and the duration, we don't do as well as other states. This is what the program looks like in the field, and we have a van with a lot of lithium-ion batteries. We can go for a couple of days without being recharged. We wade out into the surf about thigh deep and fill a little bag. Take the bag back to the lab at the end of the day. This may look familiar. It's the same IDEX system that Doug was showing. Put it in the incubator. We look at the card after about 15 hours. We put it in the afternoon. We look at it the next morning. If there's a site that's over the beach action value of 130 enterococcus per 100 mil, it will be over in 24 hours. So we have preliminary results after about 14 hours, and then final results in 24. So this is what it looks like when you get to the beach, and this is our Oregon Beach Monitoring Program sign. And it has 2 configurations. This is what it looks like when the monitoring data is good, less than 130, and this is what it looks like when it's over 130. There's a little padlock here, it just folds down. In addition to that, there may be at some selected locations that have chronic problems, like the Newport at Night Beach, there may be a more strongly worded sign that never comes down. Here's at Cannon Beach. This is the city of Cannon Beach is posted. at the Ecola Court stormwater outfall. Looking at the history of the program, since 2002, we have months of the year across the top, and these are the months that we were out collecting samples. And you can see in the early years after the program got started, we were out there all year. But as resources were reduced and we had to bring our monitoring more in line with what we could afford, we focused more and more on just this core summer area, the week before Memorial Day through Labor Day, as our core beach season. Sometimes September is a lovely month at the beach, a lot of people at the beach. And we also, if we have budget, we'll continue on through September. Or if we have budget, in interest, we may do special investigations in the fall. When the rainy weather starts in September, October, November, we often get very high numbers. So this is a good time for us to do investigations. We've done one at Cannon Beach, Rockaway, and then Sunset Bay just a couple years ago. So this is, I know you can't read this, these are the beaches that we have been to. We've been to a total of 62 beaches since the program started in 2002 to last year. And not only do we used to do more monitoring as far as the months of the year, but we also used to do a lot more sites. And as these sites tended to have low bacteria, we didn't go back to them. This is kind of a risk-based monitoring program. We tended to focus on a pretty stable group of sites since about 2011. We have some that come in and come out, but it's been basically the same group of sites for a while. Overall, we've been to 62 beaches, 17,000 plus samples. This graph looks at a couple of different things. This red haystack rock-shaped line is the number of samples per year that we've analyzed, collected and analyzed. This green line is the year-to-year grant amount. We had a step down between 2011 and 2013. This blue line is the grant amount if you converted those dollars to 2020 dollars. So that because of inflation, a dollar this year buys about 3% less than it did last year. That's a typical, for this period of time, that's a typical rate of inflation. So that if you corrected for the true value of these dollars and today's value, we've lost quite a bit of monitoring. We've lost about monitoring resources. We've lost about a third. In addition, in the early years of this program, DEQ supplemented the monitoring budget with sources of money outside the grant. And in 2011, they said, we're not going to do that anymore. This program has to be sufficient, not just what the grant provides. We're not going to put more money into it. So this is what the program looked like in 2020. It was 18 beaches, 70 sites. There were 18 freshwater sites, as you're pointing out, so stormwater outfalls in creeks like, the Gower Street outfall and the one at the Tolovana. 18 freshwater sites, 52 marine. We do it on a 3-week rotation. So we have one person monitor the North Coast sites 1 week, Mid Coast, and then South Coast the 3rd week, and then it repeats. The week before Memorial Day and the week before Labor Day, we do the whole coast. If we have an advisory, there's a sample over 130, rather than have that advisory sit on that beach for a week, we make a good effort to sample within 24 hours until we get a value below the advisory level. And I lost with 3 screens here, I often have to chase my cursor around here. So that's kind of the history of it and a summary of what we've been doing. We're going to switch now and talk about what we've just completed or in the process of completing this spring. The legislation that set us up requires that we evaluate our sites every 2 years. And we can't go to all the beaches all the time. We just don't have the resources for that. We want to focus on where we could do the most good, and we use risk assessment to do that. Risk assessment is a combination of the historical bacteria data and the beach use. Beach use is simply a count of the people within 100 meters of the sampling location. It's just an estimate of they quickly do how many people are on the beach. And historical data is past bacteria data or what we suspect. If there's sewage, sewer overflows or or that sort of thing. That's a risk factor. We open it up for public input. Oregon Health Authority takes public input, and we come up with a site list based on these three things. Then we kind of look at our budget and logistics and figure out what can we actually afford to do, what can we get done, and we come up with the site list for the next 2 years. This is the sort of thing we look at when doing a risk assessment. So on this axis here, the horizontal axis is that beach use, the average number of people within 100 meters of the sampling location. And on this axis is bacteria. In this case, it's the percent of samples that exceed that 130 enterococcus per 100 mil safe contact recreation. And I've just arbitrarily divided into 4 equal areas. In this quarter, there would be beaches with both high bacteria and a lot of people. That's where your risk would be highest. And good thing, there's no dots land in that area. These 2 areas would be medium risk, where there's here a lot of people and a lower level of bacteria, certainly not none for. And here there's a lot of bacteria, but really fewer people. This is I have a table here with what these abbreviations. So this is Sunset Bay, Nye Beach, Middle Beach, Rockaway, Harris Beach, Seal Rock, Cannon Beach, Tolovana. Seaside's the most popular beach we go to, but they really have very, very low bacteria. The next graph is kind of a similar graph. Instead of the number of samples over 130, this is the geometric mean of the enterococcus values. Geomean is less influenced by really high or really low numbers. Some of these bacteria numbers can be extremely high, and one high number will skew your mean. Geometric mean is a little less skewed by that. Again, these sites down here, low bacteria and low people. The blue dots are ones that we don't go to anymore, because that's historical data. The orange dots are ones that we went to last year. And you can see we're doing a pretty good job of hitting the sites that are putting people at most risk. These 3 here are ones that came up in the public comment period that we would like to add and probably will add. These 3 are Manzanita, Cape Kiwanda, and Oceanside. That's the table of abbreviations. And this is kind of a summary of the public input. It was in April, and we received 25 comments. 22 beaches were recommended for monitoring. There were some comments that were kind of outside the scope of the Oregon Beach Monitoring Program. Talked about trash and dumping, upstream pesticide use. A couple of people talked about the coronavirus. Unregulated camping as a source of fecal bacteria. Homeless people kind of camping out in the upstream ends. Failure of on-site septic systems, that sort of thing. Based on what the input we received, we decided to try to add these 3 beaches: Oceanside, Manzanita, and Cape Kiwanda. Cape Kiwanda is very popular. We haven't been there in 10 years. Oceanside is also popular. We went there in the past, haven't been there for 10 years. Manzanita, we went to for just a couple of years during the early part of the program. All 3 of these were fairly low. If you remember where they were on this graph, they're down here at the low end of things. I should point out this geometric mean. This is a 1 to 10 dilution, just like Doug did. Our detection level is 10 enterococcus per 100 mils, and for where we don't get a detection, we use half the detection level, or 5, for the geometric mean calculation. So these guys down here are really very low. So there's our 3 beaches. Each beach has 3 or 4 sites. If we were to plot them along the whole coast, this is, on this side is the right is Washington State. This is California. You can see a lot of the sites are in the North Coast. That's kind of, when you do a risk assessment, these are the more popular beaches. And they are kind of skewed towards the more popular beaches as part of the risk assessment. But if we do all these beaches, we'll have 21 beaches, 80 sites, 21 are freshwater, 59 are marine on that same 3-week rotation. Somebody mentioned a study in Cannon Beach. Next year, we plan to do a microbial source tracking study, which is really pretty exciting. although the enterococcus test that Doug showed and that we use really doesn't, it differentiate between different species. They're all warm-blooded animals poop out the same bacteria. This will enable us to look at the DNA of the bacteria, and the DNA in cattle is different than people, is different than dogs, elk, and we'll be able to differentiate between these things, or at least some of them. We're collecting the samples, and the Environmental Protection Agency lab in Manchester, Washington is going to do the analysis. It's not something we can currently do. So we're pretty excited about that. And this is online resources. We've got a web page, EPA has a web page, Oregon Health Authority has a web page. These are the staff contacts. If it's about the monitoring and the data, I would probably be the person to contact. If it's about the the advisories themselves, that's an Oregon Health Authority program. That would be Jara Popinga. And I'm a little bit over. Sorry about that. Probably fumbling with my side advancement, but I can take questions.
No, that was great. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can stop sharing if you want, or you can leave it up, whichever. Yeah, and we can start taking any questions if folks have them for any of our three speakers. If folks want to chime in.
And the chat has been enabled for all participants. And if you're a regular Zoom user, you also know how to raise your hand digitally, and I can use my magic powers to unmute you if you'd rather ask your question that way. All right, I'm going to start us off with a question. And you're getting all of our presenters are getting some kudos in the chat that are coming to me via direct message. So I'll start off with thank you for being here. It's really great to have the demo and sort of the big national picture from Surfrider, and then focusing in on Oregon. And my question is for Mike, and if you want to bring in any of your colleagues, let me know and I can unmute them. But I'm curious what it would take for DEQ to be able to go back to expanding to year-round monitoring, or at least monitoring in the fall when we get rain. So I'm thinking about our Surfrider Oregon data and the big flushes that happen in the fall when we get those huge readings.
Maybe I'll just, my presentation was a part of a longer one that I gave a short while ago. And can you see this here, Nye Beach? No?
Yes, I can see it.
Yeah. So this is back when we used to do year-round monitoring. So I have like the monthly average for Nye Beach near Newport. And this is the window where we monitor now. So you're absolutely right. In the fall, when it gets rainy, that's when we get our highest numbers. And we're focusing on this window here, which is kind of the driest and lowest part of the year. What would it take? It would take some more resources. I couldn't tell you what the dollar amount is. This much at 21 beaches is $221,000. So maybe we just kind of, it looks like it's about a fourth of the year. So multiply that number by 4. Aaron, what do you think?
Thanks for that, Mike. Hi, everybody. I'm Aaron Borisenko. I manage the water quality monitoring section, the section that Mike works for, and Shane here on the line today. Yeah, I mean, we could monitor into the fall for a greater period of time. We do know, as Mike's showing here with the data, that the bacteria levels increase. But what we have tended to focus on, first of all, we're trying to monitor the period of time when most people are using the beaches. So like Mike's risk assessment there, we're trying to overlap with when most people are at the beach. We realize people are using the beaches. And I will say we also have typically, in the last few years at least, been monitoring to the end of September. So we picked up some of the September stuff on this graph here. The other thing, though, we've been trying to focus on, when we have additional resources, if we kind of evaluate the budget at the end of the season, And we kind of look at those hot spots along the Oregon coast, because the other thing we can do with this money is try to do some investigations. And so like we did in Sunset Bay, where we went back to Sunset Bay, we did some, intensive monitoring in the fall, winter months to try to get down to like, where are these problems coming from? So we can start to move to solution rather than, it's great that we're out there, we're monitoring for public health, but can we also try to help move this process along towards what your objectives are and ours too, and that's find solutions. And so like the qPCR work we're going to be doing next year, that's going to take extra work, extra money, extra time out of the budget for us to do that work. But we felt it was important to try to keep that process moving forward, try to hone in on where those sources are coming from and try to move towards solution. And there's limited ways of doing that. One way is through these TMDLs that we can do. For those of you who are not familiar with that, it's a Clean Water Act method. So if a water location is listed as impaired on our impaired water bodies list, then more intensive studies get done on those water bodies to try to identify sources. But with the beach program, we can kind of jump out ahead. I mean, that's not the only way to get something done. So we, try when we have the budget to do some of those investigations in areas that we've had hotspots, to try to push that along and keep people aware of what's going on in those areas. It's a priority decision. So we could do more monitoring. We just kind of go on with routine monitoring. I think we all know the wet period is when there's more bacteria. As Doug showed, we got that high bacteria number at Gower Street. It's been very rainy, right? We just had a big rain come through, not surprising. So that's been kind of how we focused our efforts. But yeah, it's up for conversation for sure. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Looks like we have a question from Charlie around regarding federal property and beach monitoring. Charlie, do you want to unmute and ask, or did that question?
Sure. That was just the first time I had heard during Mike's presentation that they were disallowed to monitor on federal property. And I guess I would love clarification on that. I get my understanding is that our beaches are public and they are state resource. And I also we are existing. I believe that this program exists wholly on federal funding, and then state dollars are not allocated for it. So maybe we just dive into a couple of those questions.
Well, you're right. It exists just on this federal grant dollar, and the legislation that Congress passed that set up the Beach Act and provides this funding said that we could not spend this on federal land. Now, you're right. Oregon Beach is publicly owned, and I made a very eloquent display of mapping this out and citing Oregon rules and regs and so forth. And the federal people I work with were not impressed. They said, if it's under the jurisdiction of the feds, even if Oregon owns from the highest high tide out 300 miles, he said no. And we actually had monitored at Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area. That's what most of that 45 miles is that area. And it was very low in fecal bacteria. And somehow they figured out they redid their mapping and they said, whoa, what's this? You cannot go here anymore. That is against the law.
I'd love to see that communication. We advocate at the federal level, and I'm actually shocked and astounded that they would disallow monitoring at the state.
They didn't want us to use the grant to supplement a federal agency's budget. The whoever, Bureau of Reclamation or National Parks, whoever runs that seashore should be doing the monitoring, but they don't.
Yeah, that's terrible. I see Aaron's got his hand up. He's eager to jump in, so I'll let Aaron jump in.
Yeah, I was just to back you up, Mike, and what you said, and Mike did an admirable job of trying to make the case that, the high tide mark and the beach itself was Oregon property. A lot of it honestly has to do with the allocation formulas that the EPA uses for providing funds to states. So they kind of, we go back and forth with them over what we consider beaches, and then they have their GIS consultants saying these are beaches as far as we're concerned, and it's almost a negotiation, quite frankly, about what is and what isn't a beach, and we fight pretty hard for what is Oregon Beach, and it's in this case, they were very adamant that there's a stretch of coast here that is not part of the allocation formula for Oregon, unfortunately.
If Oregon's interested in putting any comments into EPA region here on that, we will 100% back you on that. We'd love to author those. We are actually in the process right now of looking at Region 9 on comments to EPA for inclusivity about how the Federal Beach Act monitoring program it provides for exclusive dollars for certain beaches, and in some ways that affects the BIPOC community and the local community in different ways in Hawaii. And so similarly, I would say that we could think in Oregon about that exclusivity of how those federal dollars are spent.
It makes a difference too, as Aaron touched on. There's one grant for the whole country and it gets divvied up. And one of the things that goes into the formula is how many miles of eligible beach do you have? And, we had 360 miles. There's about, 90 miles of rocky bits. So that leaves us, that 46 miles is a 45 miles of federal beach is a significant chunk of that, of what's left over after you subtract the rocky parts.
So I will stop here because I'm dominating this. I would love to talk to you about the rocky part too, because I would argue that that's an important part of ocean recreation as well, and maybe is worthwhile for monitoring in some cases. But we could take that offline because I'm dominating this question answer period.
Okay.
We do have a couple more questions, but I hope our speaker is okay with staying on for like a couple extra minutes just so we can get through. Okay, cool. Thank you. And then we can, circle back if folks want to. Yeah, so it looks like Scott had a question on the current status of the Shorties, septic and sewage. Anecdotally, it seems a bit, quote, muddy after it rains or a busy weekend. And I'm not sure who that question was to, but does anyone want to take that on?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Is that short sands they're asking?
Yeah, sorry, Shorties. Yeah, short sands.
Short sands, yeah.
So
Well, yeah, when it rains, it washes. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's higher bacteria during that or not.
Okay.
We did, as you pointed out, there was a period of time when something with the restrooms was malfunctioning, and there were some high values. But it's my understanding that since then it's been pretty good.
This is Jessie, and I just wanted to chime in. Scott, you can go to the link for the Blue Water Task Force and see what the most recent readings that Surfrider collected for our water quality monitoring there.
Perfect. Yeah, we can put
I'm
that.
putting a link in the chat directly to the Oswald West site. And on the left-hand side, there's a big yellow button that says full report, and you can actually look at all of the data that we have for that site. The graph that immediately shows is the sort of the last sample, but if you download data, it gives you all of the data that we have. So also, if anyone is into data analysis and telling stories, we would love to have you volunteer. So if you like to stay dry, that's another way you can volunteer with Blue Water Task Force, and you can reach out to Jessie about that.
Awesome. Thank you. And then the last question that we have here for now is from Parker. So is there a volunteer force or helping that can be done in hand with DEQ?
Yeah, that has come up, and it came up in our public comment period too. People asking about that, and we do coordinate with volunteers and watershed councils. They can get Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board grants to pay for equipment and even hiring staff to do a bunch of different things, including monitoring. And then we do work with them. That is not necessarily completely free. We don't use it for kind of core regulatory type of things. But that's something we could talk about. I don't know. We'd have a volunteer monitoring coordinator, but it takes staff to do it, and I'm not sure we can. We couldn't use grant money to do it. We have to, if we receive this grant, we have to do this monitoring. So it'd have to be sources from someplace else. And like you guys are doing, that's great. Going to places and frequency of monitoring that we don't get to, maybe extending out onto the shoulder seasons in the fall and that sort of thing. But as far as us incorporating that data into some kind of surveillance program like this, I don't know if we could do that. I don't know. Curtis, do you want to? I mean, I don't think Oregon Health Authority would use volunteer monitoring data.
Let me jump in here if I might, and I know we're over time, but just to add, first of all, the data that you guys collect is fantastic information. It really adds to the gaps that we have. As Charlie pointed out, there are rocky shorelines. There are a lot of places on the coast that we do not visit. And so, when it comes to doing risk assessments of places that maybe need to be thought about or addressed in our program, that adds additional information, and the energy you guys bring to that is really helpful. The issue for us, is a little bit about the resources, the limited resources that we have to do this program. There's also, we have to make sure that the signs are getting flipped on time. When an advisory is issued, we got to make sure to get back and resample those to update that information regularly and make sure that those signs are accurate. So there's a lot of program components. Thomas and Shane go through regular performance testing sample criteria with EPA labs to make sure that they're meeting it. Not that you guys couldn't do that type of work. I saw Doug doing his work and I thought, great procedure. He knows what he's doing. So it's just a matter of the amount of resources. You said you had 7 labs, and I was thinking, wow, if that was spread out over 7 labs, that would not be a lot to do all the work that gets done. There's also a really large data management component. We have to, at the end of the season, QC all of our data. That gets uploaded into our system and then gets uploaded into EPA's system, as does Oregon Health Authority's information. So there's that data management component. There's a lot of wrangling that goes on, I guess, with this, and plus our special investigations that we do. So, but what you guys do and the additional information you bring to the equation is amazing. So thank you.
Go ahead and chime in, Curtis.
Hey, yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot. Curtis Coote from Oregon Health Authority. And just to add on to what Aaron just said, Surfriders plays a role that we simply can't play as a state agency, and you're able to put pressure on different decision makers and be able to make improvements to the water, and you've proven that you're able to do that. So we applaud you for that, and you're able to use your data in that way. And we just want to thank you for your support.
Absolutely.
Wow. Thank you. We appreciate everything you all do. So I know we're running tight on time. Really quickly, I just had a very brief question, if it's okay. I was just curious, Jesse, you mentioned that you need volunteers to pick up samples, and I was just kind of curious how volunteers hear about your work normally, and how you've had success finding those volunteers in the past. Maybe it'll help us find more of those volunteers.
Thank you, Nancy. Well, let's see. In the past, a lot of it has been through word of mouth. I know that a couple of years ago, I was putting, we were reaching out to our local newspapers, and I was also on the radio, and I think that we could probably amp that up again. There was a time period where we were doing trainings, and I would train, 4 to 5 people at a time, but then the follow through with people was a little bit tricky. Like, for example, we have the school. So the school is open, weekdays. And there are certain hours where we could drop it off. And so the logistics are a little bit tricky. So people have to be patient and it has to work with their schedule. So they can't always drop off something on the weekend. So we're somewhat limited in our drop off times, but sometimes that works great for folks. And so we plan to get the word out there more. We do have social media, and we are starting to, like I said in the beginning, and what Bree said, kind of wake up from this pandemic, and we'll be putting the word out more. But really, it's going to be weekdays during school hours when we will need to drop that off, and also coordinating with Doug, of course, as well. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, if there aren't any remaining questions, I know we're over time, so I want to respect everybody's time here, but thank you so much to all of our speakers. That was awesome. Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Ava. Thank you, everybody. This was awesome. This was a great
Thank
night.
you for all you guys do. You're great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy.
Send us questions.
Yeah, and feel free to reach out to any of us, or I can connect with folks if people have questions that come up later. So yeah, thanks.
Thank
We'll
you.
get a follow-up email out to folks with some of those great links. And I've had some other resources that were sent directly to me as well. And we'll make sure information about how to volunteer and get involved is right at the top of that follow-up email. And please feel free to forward that to all of your friends.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Everybody. Have a good night.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Don't swim after it rains.
I know.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.